And to look at life in this unique town, we sent a person whose qualifications for the job were impeccable. Richard Neville, give him a welcome. I'm looking forward to this report because I drove up to Nimbin about 4 or 5 years ago, and apart from the little town, which looked as though it had had a new lease of life, I couldn't really see much of the alternative living because they're all hidden out in the bush, apparently.
Exactly. They want to get away from people like you in cars coming up with a cry on them, you see.
Yeah,
they're all doing
enough.
it in their own little hamlets and villages behind the hills.
Now, you were there at the beginning, weren't you?
Yes.
And just explain to people, we've got, it's up past beautiful Lismore.
Yes, Lismore. It's just a little bit to the north of Lismore, and it's inland from the coast. It's about an hour's drive from Byron Bay.
And it was a dairying country originally, wasn't it? Dairy farmers.
Dairying and timber. And that will, that's the town. And I think that this footage is probably taken of the festival that they had there in 1973. And see, people ought to remember that the whole ideals of the 60s at this time all over the world had kind of were collapsing down. The flower children were catching diseases. They were carrying guns. There was the Charles Manson affair. Yeah. And people on the whole were beginning to get very depressed or going back into straight culture, very confused. And 2 university students in Australia who were supposed to hold a very traditional kind of university festival drove round the north coast to find a perfect little town where they would just invite counterculture people from all over the world and all the people in Australia just to come and celebrate all the ideals of the 60s. And they chose Nimbin. Right. And in fact, I was sitting in a basement in London, slightly baffled and dazed by the end of an era, and I got a letter saying, come back to...
This is you in those days?
Yes, baffled and dazed, as I said. And they said, look, come back with Nimbin. People from all over Australia are going to come and live in wigwams, and people are going to form communes, and you can sing and dance and have a good time. So, like a lot of other people, I came and moseyed along there, which was exactly 10 years ago today, and it was quite extraordinary because my experience basically in England had been going to rock festivals where people were always sleeping in the mud or in the lavatories and stealing each other's sleeping bags and ripping each other off, and you had St John's Ambulance and the Red Cross serving cocoa late at night. It was all very whingy and pommy and despairing and negative. And there I was at Nimbin. It was just incredible. You'd just get up and sort of bathe in the river, and you'd...
perfect climate.
It was absolutely extraordinary climate. Lots of fabulous people. And I remember that there were these sort of rubbish bins, and it was all sort of metal, vegetable matter, paper. And I once by mistake I put an apple core in the wrong bin. And I spent sort of 10 minutes wondering whether I should go back and take it out and put it in the compost bin, because that's how sort of Nimbin got to you.
Oh, really? So idealistic.
Well, it was, and sort of yoga and beekeeping and all sorts of things. I mean, there was children who were born there. But see, Nimbin was very advanced because although kids were born during that festival, you could all sort of watch it on video hookups in the trees if you didn't happen to be, right in the tent. So it was always trying to look ahead as well as looking behind.
But you could watch them being born on television?
Yeah, on a little local bush video unit, if you wanted to. Or you could swim, or you could go to there were incredible sort of makeshift sauna baths just built by the riverbanks, which you could go in, and that's when I first realised that that the taboo against being sexually inclined in mixed company was a thing of the past. In other words, Nimbin had lots going for it on many different levels. Is that delicately enough for you?
Beautifully done.
Excellent.
Martha Gardner could not have put it better. Now, you actually got involved and carried away with it all. You invested in one of these sort of communes, didn't you?
Absolutely. But I spent $200 buying a share in a cooperative called Tuntable Falls. And a lot of people put $200 in, and we ended up buying about 1,500 acres behind the hills at Nimbin. Because I bought the share and then I went straight off and lived in New York, because it was always in the back of my mind that if all else collapsed, it's really like an insurance policy for me. Right. Like at the end of this spot, perhaps I'm fired. Well, what I'll do is I'll whip up to Nimbin, claim my $200 share, and live in a wigwam at Tuntable Falls and start the sauna bath operation all over again. So it's always there in the back of my mind.
I know. It's sort of an alternative retirement plan.
Yes, well, it beats retiring in the North Shore, I feel.
Yes, absolutely. And what are the costs of living there like now? I mean, you say $200 to buy a share.
Oh, you couldn't do that now. See, they're not even selling shares in that commune anymore. But they've got, in fact, communes themselves have changed because it's married to the straight culture in a way, and there are things called bush hamlets where people form companies and they buy a share in the company and they have their own bit of land, but it now costs sort of several $1,000s. I mean, there was also a bit of land I was looking at that was, I think, was about $20,000 for 300 acres. Now, that today would be $200,000 or $300,000 for exactly the same bit of land. So, you could have just gone to that festival as a real estate broker and you'd now be a millionaire. In fact, there are, in Nimbin now, these long-haired people are actually, in terms of their land, they are millionaires according to their land values, but of course they won't translate that into cash because they're too busy making bees and doing yoga. Making honey and doing yoga.
Making bees?
Making bees
in the sauna?
I didn't want you to get carried away.
Yeah, all right. Well, it sounds wonderful. Well, look, let's have a look at it on film, your film report, and then we'll discuss it after that.
Right.
Find the cost of freedom buried in the ground. Mother Earth will swallow you. Lay your body down.
When I came to this town 10 years ago, it was dying. Just a few old people outside shops, hoping someone would buy up their land. Then all these counterculture people came and sang and danced and smoked a lot of dope and had all sorts of dreams. Well, the festival ended, but a lot of these new settlers stayed behind to try and put their dreams into practice. So I'd like to wander around Nimbin and see how these people are getting on 10 years later. An old friend, Jan Oliver, came here with 4 or 5 others and set up one of Nimbin's first communes. Now, one of many. It is, as you can see, most aptly named Paradise Valley. How many people are here now in Paradise Valley?
There's about 30 of us.
Can you explain sort of what you mean by sort of hamlet development within a commune? Because I think people have the idea that everybody's sort of living in the one room the whole time.
When it's raining, sometimes it is.
Right.
Basically, it means legally we are allowed to share some of the basic facilities like kitchen, dining room, bathroom, that otherwise had to be every house must have. To be a recognised house, you must have all of these things, your own laundry, all that kind of thing. For us, at the moment, the group of people that I'm living with, we have, as you've seen, a fairly interconnected system of buildings hung together with verandas and walkways. For other people, that's very much more separate little building spaces with a communal space that they come to. On other properties, it is people very much having a fairly nuclear little scene with their own kitchens and things even, but with some communal space, hall or dining room which they come together and meet in regularly. Right. So it has a great deal of variation, but I guess the element is a sharing of some basic facilities which bring your life frequently together. Like if you're in a suburban household, I can be next to somebody for 15 years and we really only share picking the paper up in the morning together or picking the milk up or raking the leaves up on a Sunday afternoon. The kids from the alternative community school were rehearsing their own circus act when we caught up with them in the main street. Can any of you tell me whether it's different living around here in Nimbin and around here? Is it different here than if you were living in the city?
Yes.
Okay.
Very different.
Why is it different?
Well, the atmosphere is different. Yeah.
Yeah, what do you mean by atmosphere?
Well, you feel more free.
Yeah.
And in the city, there's more people in the city.
Right. Right. How many of you live in a commune?
All of us. Almost all of us.
What?
Nearly all of us.
What do you reckon the difference is between living in a commune and just living in a house with one mother and father?
Well, in a commune, everybody helps to get everything going.
Yeah.
Whereas with just parents, it's harder. Because there's not so many people trying their hardest to get it going.
Do any of you have mothers and fathers that still live together as mothers and fathers? Or do you have lots of mothers and fathers? Or?
Lots of broke up, but now they're just living close together.
Right.
Still broken up.
Right. Many of you got parents that break?
My parents are together.
Well, the ones that are breaking up, how did you feel about that, or how do you feel about that?
I don't know. Ours didn't actually break up. They're just going their own way.
Are you going your own way too?
No.
No. Do your parents smoke dope at all?
No. Sometimes.
One does.
What kind of question?
Say that again.
What kind of a question is that?
That's right. Well, the reason I asked it because I wanted to know whether you were going to smoke dope when you grow up.
No. I'm not going to smoke. What kind of
Why
a
not?
question is that? Because it's awful for you.
Well, when you grow up, do you think you'll live in a house, in an ordinary old-fashioned kind of family, or will you live in a commune?
Commune.
These children don't go to the community alternative school, they go to the state school. Maybe their ideas are a little bit different. Tell me about the good things about living in Nimbin.
Well, there's a lot more freedom to choose what you like to do, and in a city there's a lot less space to move around and do what you want to do.
Right.
And like in New York, instead of having this beautiful country around which is surrounding us, they have freeways and highways and roads and buses all the time.
Right.
And you have to carry a gun with you to stay alive.
Is there anything bad about living in Nimbin? Anything you don't like?
Yes, it's the park and all the broken glass and the people who sleep in the park, which you're not supposed to do in any park.
And what do you call the people who sleep in the park?
Droogs or hippies.
And what does droogs mean?
Droogs mean the people who smoke dope,
Yes.
drink, and just go around completely out of it.
Well, I live with my mother and father.
Right. And do any of you wish you lived in a commune?
I sort of live in a commune. I live at a place in the Coffs Harbour where my father lives, where my mum's boyfriend lives in Paradise Valley, and our house is just a normal old house with mum and the children.
So you have a bit of all. When do you think, when you're older, you'll come and live back in Nimbin?
No. There's not enough employment here. Like, if you want to get a good job, then it'll take you a long way. It doesn't start in Nimbin at all.
Right. Paul, you were involved with the original Agrias Festival. What do you think that achieved, bringing all those thousands of people together here in Nimbin 10 years ago?
I think the existence of Nimbin really proves that civilisation's at a crossroads. We've come through 200 years of the Industrial Revolution and it doesn't work. And I believe that Nimbin is an advanced point of the post-industrial state, a post-industrial society. It's not an alternative society. We only have one society. It's humankind. Right. And I think Nimbin is part of a development towards the future.
It's something that really takes a lot of work, and that's what the communities are really doing at the moment, the communities that we live in. They're forcing us into these situations where we have to really look at the way we live and the way we relate to each other.
I think the focus is on living gently on the earth and living gently on each other. The simple life in that essence, and realising that in getting satisfaction out of what's always been known as those things which are free, in the personal relationships, in creativity, in enjoying nature, is where we can enormously reduce our demands on what aren't available resources in the long term and in the very short term.
We had great desires for cooperation 10 years ago and started cooperatives and things like that, which now, unfortunately, some of them have dissolved into just mere private capitalistic enterprise. It's no great success story in every level. It's people striving to work out the problems that exist at this point in time. And that's manifest mostly in the young people.
It's Saturday afternoon, and I've just come to the local pub to talk to the lads here about what it's like growing up in Nimbin. Compared to the way most Australian boys grow up, your life has been different, hasn't it? Growing up on a cooperative. Are you glad about that?
Yeah, I'd rather live on a cooperative than a little cement block in the middle of Sydney with a little pollution.
Right, okay, fine. Do you think that sort of the ideas that came here 10 years ago when they had that festival, I mean, do you think that those ideas are on the whole sort of working, or do you think that some of them have failed?
Oh, most of the ideas people come up here with have gone, just because there's too many people here now.
Yeah?
There's just so many people here now, you can't do what you were going to do.
Will any of you here, do you think, go, when you're older, sort of get married and live in an ordinary sort of house with a car and a straight job? I mean, will you live a more conventional life in the end?
No. I'll probably have a house, a nice house and a nice car, but I won't be living in the middle of the city or something.
Right.
Sending my kids to school with tyres and crap on.
As soon as I finish my apprenticeship down here at the garage, I'm going to go for like just go around Australia or do something for about 12 months and then come straight back here.
Right.
Because I go to all the cities. I don't like cities that much because they're too big, too crowded.
It's just
a lot of
I
pollution.
reckon there's something about the place. Whenever you go anywhere, you always got to come back.
Yeah, you always
I always
waiting to
feel
come back.
homesick.
Yeah.
Nimbin, I always have to come back.
Always want to come back.
Oh, it is fascinating, isn't it?
It's amazing.
Do you think the kids have got any of the parents' ideals left? I mean, like, it was interesting hearing the little ones saying no to drugs and all that sort of thing. You think they'd all be looking forward to the day they got their first joint in their fingers?
Yes, I think a lot of them have probably just seen too many of their parents bombed out and not getting their acts together.
That's interesting, isn't it?
But on the other hand, Mike, I mean, we had to cut quite a lot of the kids' comments out because some of them just sounded like they were on soapboxes and talking politics. I mean, they were giving lectures, I mean, really the young ones on nuclear disarmament or on the American policy in South America. I thought, really, we're not quite ready for this at this stage. So I think some of them are. I mean, I think one thing, there was a slogan I think I saw up there which was, act locally, but think globally. And I think to some extent that's true, that they're not quite so self-centred or obnoxious as city kids, or as kind of flat as those sort of children I see in Kmart, just staring endlessly at the liquid.
They were capable of saying yeah and dunno.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you see,
it's a total conversation. At least they can talk, which is
exactly. And a few years ago, some friends of mine wrote this book called The Children of the Counterculture, and they've got 2 kids themselves, and they travelled all over America, going to all the different communes. That's them there with their 2 kids, and they concluded also that the further they got away from the mainstream American life, the less self-centred and the less freaked out the kids became. And there was one commune that was so famous for how well behaved its children were that other kids were brought from all over America and let loose in this commune for a couple of weeks to sort of straighten them out. And their trick was that they realised that children love being where the centre of action is. They love being where all the fun is. And if they're really mucking up and ripping you off and they're not allowed near the centre of the fun, then very, very quickly they kind of straighten up and conform. And so so it's not just in Nimbin, but I think part of the commune experiment has produced some terrific kids.
But what about the adults? So they look as though they've become very conservative, the ones sort of in our generation.
Well, I think they have become, because I think they've now got something to conserve. You see, a lot of their values have changed because, like, for instance, a lot of the couples moved there onto a commune, say, with other couples, and the first thing, of course, they did was to all sleep with each other.
Right.
That seemed a lot of fun, but then that sort of has passed over, and that's seen to be very destructive now.
Yeah.
So they actually have very stable relationships. They really frown on all the new settlers coming in. They're terrifically anti-droog, and on top of that, they don't really want to repeat the mistakes of their own past, but at the same time, they're into relation with the very old settlers. It's fabulous. And that girl we saw interviewed at that commune told me a terrific story. She was just driving along and she saw one of the old-time farmers chopping down all these trees, and she stopped the car and she said, "Listen, do you know that they're paperbark trees? They're rather special. They're only grown in this country." And he said, "Oh, gee, no one ever told me that before. I was just chopping it down because that's where I'm fencing." She said, "Well, they are rather kind of cute and stuff like that." He said, "Oh, well, great." And then he just continued fencing around the trees. And I think it's on these very small, rather unpublicised levels that a terrific change is taking place and a really good interaction between the old counterculture heavies and the traditional Aussie farmer.
So it lives on.
Oh, I think it lives on and it thrives. And I mean, there's an old saying that a map without utopia on it is not worth drawing. And I think Australia without Nimbin and other social experiments wouldn't be worth living in it.
Yeah. Oh, thank you very much for that report. And interesting to see it's still going well. Richard Neville, ladies and gentlemen. Nimbin alive and well in 1983. We take a break. The reigning Miss Australia, Lisa Cornelius, will join us. And then we're going to meet the 7 state finalists who are competing for the title this year.
Yeah.